People say the scariest thing in the world is finding out someone wants to kill you. They're wrong. The most frightening thing is finding out they wanted to do it to your daughter and your granddaughter, and they almost succeeded. That night, I was standing on the porch of 317 Redwood Street, looking at my 4-year-old granddaughter, shaking inside a thin toddler shirt, and behind the door, the sound of a beer bottle shattering, a drunk man growling, and a choked whimper I knew I would never forget. I didn't live there. I was visiting. But in 30 seconds, I understood that if I walked away, a child might never get the chance to grow up. And so a man who once spent 10 years locked up because his temper burned too hot had to learn how to use his silence to save an entire family. If you've ever witnessed injustice inside your own bloodline, leave a... So I know you're here. And tell me which city you're listening from. If you believe silence, when used at the right moment, can protect a child, follow. Thank you for staying. My name is Elias Mercer, 60 years old, a carpenter, and a former United States Marine. The last 10 years of my life were spent behind the white walls of Rainier Behavioral Health Center, the place outsiders call a treatment facility, though anyone who's been inside knows it feels more like a prison than a hospital. I wasn't sent there because I was insane. I was sent there because I was angry, an anger that put 3 men who threatened my older brother in the hospital when I was 17. The judge looked at my file, then at me, and said, "Impulse control disorder. You don't need prison. You need to learn to control yourself?" I learned, but the price was 10 years of my life, framed behind a door that locked from both sides. That morning, Washington rain scratched long slashes across the gray sky. The visitation room had 1 table bolted to the floor, 2 plastic chairs, and the smell of disinfectant that never left. The metal door opened. Clack. Nurse Alvarez, the young woman who'd only been here a few weeks, smiled. "Mr. Mercer, your brother is here. Elliot Mercer." I nodded. Same last name, same face. She had no idea how much trouble that simple fact would cause later. When my brother walked in, it felt like someone dropped a stone straight into my chest. His face was purple, dried blood around his mouth. His right eye was swollen to a thin slit. He walked tilted, one arm wrapped around his ribs like he was trying to keep the bones from breaking further. I jumped to my feet. "Elliot, Jesus, what happened to you?" He laughed. A thin, fragile laugh meant only to keep me from worrying, but his bruised eyes told the truth for him. "It's just stuff at home," he murmured. "Home? Redwood Street," I pressed. He said nothing, and in that silence, I already knew. I pulled the chair out for him. Under the yellow light, the bruises showed, their entire map, blue, purple, yellow, like a geography of violence. "Colton," he exhaled, "and his mother, Janet, and his sister, Marcy." All 3 at once, it sounded like a switch flipping in my head. He told the story slowly, broken up like each piece hurt to lift out of memory. Harper was working her late shift at the library. Colton was drunk, down more than $800 in gambling. Lily was hungry, crying, and unable to sleep. Harper said half a sentence before Colton smashed the beer bottle. Janet started screaming, blaming Harper for making her son stressed. Marcy shoved her face into Harper's and yelled that she didn't know how to be a mother. Elliot did the one thing I should have been there to do. He stepped between them and Harper. The result was this. Janet yanked his hair. Marcy shoved him into the wall. Colton kicked his ribs over and over. Then Harper called 911. The cops showed up. The body cam caught Elliot shaking. The house torn apart. Harper in tears. But Colton said he was drunk and fell. Janet fake cried, claiming Harper was unstable after birth. Marcy lied that Harper smashed things. Police said there wasn't enough evidence. No one got arrested. Twice in 6 months, it's in the report. Domestic dispute, no arrest, insufficient evidence. The reason? Harper was terrified of losing custody of Lily if she told the truth. Elliot hid his injuries, and the Drake family, They were too damn good at pretending to be victims. I looked at the mirror on the wall. Two faces almost frighteningly identical. Same cowlick, same nose bridge, same tiny scar on the left eyebrow, but only one of us was carrying the bruises of the outside world. "Elliot," I whispered, "you should have told me." "So what?" he laughed, a broken, almost crying laugh. "So you could get a few more bones broken for me?" I opened my mouth, but the speaker crackled. "Elias Mercer, exam room 3B, pre-discharge evaluation. Last month, Dr. Kaplan wrote, stable. Recommend transferring Elias to a partial outpatient program." Meaning, I was about to be released. A door had cracked open, but now it was opening wider than I expected. "Elliot," I asked, "do you know what my ID says in the files?" "E. Mercer. You're E. Mercer, too." I tapped the name badge clipped to my patient's shirt. First initial, last name. No one could distinguish between those two names when the two faces wearing them were nearly identical. New staff. The file photo from 12 years ago. Both of us younger, leaner, mirror images. I was being evaluated for release. They expected me to walk out stable. A thought hit me. Dangerous, reckless, but clear as freshly sanded wood. I stood. "Elliot, switch with me." His eyes widened. No, Elias, you'll go to prison." "I've already been locked up for 10 years, I murmured. "Not because I was wrong, but because I protected you. And now you're beaten to hell, and I'm supposed to sit here answering Kaplan's checklist?" He trembled, not from fear, but because he knew I was right. "You'll be safe in here," I said. 3 meals a day. No one is touching you. All you have to do is tell Dr. Kaplan you need more treatment time. You know how to do that. And me? I'll walk out. I'll go to Redwood Street. I didn't say, "And I'll deal with Colton." But he saw it in my eyes. We swapped clothes, swapped seats, swapped our damn breathing. Elliot, with the bruised, battered face, put on the light blue patient uniform and clipped on the badge reading, "E. Mercer, patient 3B. I, Elias, slipped into his gray work jacket and clipped the badge reading, "Elliot Mercer, maintenance." From the outside, the man in the room wearing the patient badge was Elias, and the man being escorted for pre-release evaluation was Elliot, my older brother. The door opened. Nurse Alvarez returned. "Mr. Mercer, Dr. Kaplan is waiting for you." Elliot, the one playing me, stood and followed her, every step perfect for a patient nearing release. And I, the brother playing him, sat exactly where a maintenance worker ending his visit would sit. When he disappeared behind the door, I rose, straightened the jacket, and walked toward the staff exit. Passing guard Jenkins, the guy who'd started 2 weeks ago, he glanced at my badge reading Elliot Mercer, maintenance, then smiled politely. "Off shift already, Mr. Mercer?" I gave him a faint smile. "Yeah, heading home." No suspicion, no second look. No one realized we had switched lives. By the end of the day, I signed the discharge papers. I signed Elliot Mercer in handwriting that the two of us had practiced to match since we were kids. The gates of Rainier Behavioral opened. Wet earth, Tacoma's cold wind, highway noise humming in the distance. Freedom, temporary or not, ran straight down my spine. I grabbed my brother's duffel, zipped the jacket up to my throat, and walked through the rain toward the bus stop, never looked back. From that moment on, I, Elias Mercer, was no longer inside Rainier Behavioral. And Elliot Mercer, my older brother, the one the world thought was too gentle to fight back, was on the way to 317 Redwood Street, where his daughter was being beaten, where my granddaughter was shaking in a corner. A monster named Colton Drake believed no one would ever stand up to him. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Bus route number 7 took 40 minutes to carry me from Tacoma to Gig Harbor. The fog bus window reflected the face of Elliot Mercer, the man everyone on Redwood Street believed to be gentle, harmless, the kind who never fights back. But inside Elliot's worn jacket sat me, Elias Stone Mercer, the man who spent 10 years learning to control his anger, not erase. It. Low clouds drifted over Puget Sound, so close they looked like they were brushing the rooftops. The cold, the Seattle kind that seeps into bone, made everything feel heavier, sadder. When I stepped off at the last stop and turned onto Redwood Street, I understood immediately why Harper, my brother's daughter, called this place the House of Shouting. 317 Redwood Street looked like a dirty shadow of itself. Beer cans littering the yard, half a fence collapsed, baby towels hanging over rusted stakes, peeling front door paint, and a broken chair lying in the grass. I had barely set foot on the sidewalk when the door flew open. Janet Drake, Colton's mother, poked her head out, her sharp, bird-like eyes narrowing the second she saw me. She yelled loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "He's back again? Your crazy old father doesn't belong in this neighborhood." I didn't live there. I only came to check on my granddaughter and Harper. But to the Drakes, my existence alone was enough to set them off. Her voice was so shrill that a crow perched on the power line flew away. I kept calm, kept walking, but I heard the tapping of phone keys from across the street. Penny, the neighborhood woman who wore long robes and treated her phone like a weapon, was recording. I heard her mutter, "Posting to Gig Harbor Community Watch. Let them see the drama at 317. Wet slush cracked under my boots. Janet marched closer, face flushed with rage. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Mercer. Your brother Elliot does nothing but cause trouble. Harper feeds this entire house, and still has to carry him on her back. Old men like you are the problem." I stopped on the third step, calm. Control your breath. Do not become Elias. I had to remain Elliot, the weak man this family had bullied for 6 years. "I just want to check if Harper and little Lily are okay," I said as gently as I could. "Okay?" Janet scoffed. "They're never okay when you show up." 3 neighbors near an old ice cream truck were watching. One whispered, "Drake's bullying the Mercers again." Penny lifted her phone. "The clip's uploading. Give me a sec. I'll tag the mods." I knew all of that would become evidence later, worth more than any testimony, but Janet wasn't finished. "Get out. Don't bring your crazy here and curse my family." She shoved me, but I kept my balance. No reaction, no hint of strength. I had to be Elliot, the man they thought they could break. The door suddenly burst open behind her. Harper stepped out. She'd lost weight. Her eyes were hollow. She held Lily in her arms, 3 years old, but looking barely past the age of first steps. Lily stared at me for a moment, blinking like she was trying to remember if this really was Grandpa Elliot. Then she whispered, "Grandpa, you came back?" I crouched to meet her eyes. "Yeah, I'm here." Harper pulled me inside, murmuring, "Hurry, don't stay out where she can see." But Janet still shouted from the doorway, "Harper, I'm paying for that old man with my money. I'm tired of supporting all you freeloaders." Harper spun around, voice trembling with anger. "You don't pay anything. I've paid every bill for 6 years by myself. You forget that?" The words hit me like a hammer. $1,850 a month. 6 years. Every cent paid by Harper. A part-time librarian, a single mother, carrying an entire household on her back. One detail, that later I would turn into a legal basis to make the Drake family bleed compensation. But right then, Janet burst out laughing with that disgusting, mocking bark of hers. "You think anyone believes that? You're a useless single mother. Without Colton, you wouldn't survive a day." The insult wasn't just for Harper. It was for Elliot, and for me. Harper turned away, swallowing tears. I wanted to rip that laugh straight out of Janet's throat, but I held it. Control. "Elias, you're playing Elliot. Don't ruin this." Inside the house, the air reeked of beer, old food, and the raw smell of fear. The walls were dented. The sofa was shredded. I set my bag down, scanning everything, each detail like an incident report. Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, Daddy Colton said I can't make noise. If I make noise, he's gonna—" She bit her lip, eyes glossy. Harper's hand tightened around her daughter's shoulder. I swallowed hard. Then from the end of the hallway came a rattling sound. The bedroom door opened. A heavy-set man stepped out, broad-shouldered, staggering. The flickering yellow bulb cut across his face, flushed red from alcohol, patchy beard, eyes dull but full of the same violence that had bruised my brother, terrorized Harper, and made a 3-year-old afraid of her own breath. Colton Drake. The man who beat my brother, beat his wife, threatened his toddler, and stared straight into a police body cam while lying without blinking. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, glanced around, then narrowed his eyes when he saw me. "Oh," he snorted. "Old man's back." He walked closer. His breath, thick with cheap beer, hit my face. "Let me guess," he drawled, like some drunken animal. "You're here to screw everything up again, aren't you?" He jabbed his greasy finger against my forehead. "Old man is the problem." Harper froze. Lily trembled in her arms. I didn't move. I couldn't, not yet. I had to let him believe I was Elliot, the weak man he'd bullied for 6 straight years. But the moment his finger touched my head, I knew. In a few days, his world would crater beneath him. I lifted my gaze, stared straight into him, and for the first time in his life, Colton Drake stepped back half a step. I knew something was coming, I just didn't know it would come this soon. A little before 10 p.m., Harper put Lily to bed in the small room and stepped back into the living room, where I was checking the cracks in the wall, cracks Colton had punched in weeks ago. Harper looked at me, worry tightening her voice. "Dad, I don't know if he's going to drink more tonight." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let me handle it." That wasn't to comfort her. It was to steady the darker part of me, the part that almost broke loose when Colton jabbed his finger into my forehead earlier. I spent 10 years in Rainier Behavioral, 10 years of learning control, not forgetting Marine combat conditioning, joint control, shadow stance, momentum redirection. All of it lived in my muscles, waiting, and tonight it woke. The door slammed into the wall. Colton was drunk again. Seattle's cold night air carried the stench of alcohol through the doorway like a toxic fog. He threw his coat on the floor, eyes bloodshot. Janet followed, muttering that Harper didn't know how to keep a home, didn't know how to raise a child, then pointed straight at me. "See? That old man is why Colton's stressed?" Harper stepped in front of me, her voice shaking. "Stop it, Mom. Why do you blame everything on my father?" But Colton didn't hear anything. He looked at me with the confidence of a man used to hitting people and walking away clean. "Old man," he growled, "I warned you this afternoon, and you're still here." I stayed still, voice steady. "I'm here to help Harper. This is her home." He barked a laugh, wet, sour with beer. "This house is mine. I pay the bills." "No," Harper cut in. "I pay them. 6 years." Colton froze for a beat. 1 beat. Enough for fury to ignite. He lunged. I expected it the second he stepped inside. Contact 1. Testing force. A straight punch to my face. A drunk man's punch is as predictable as a loose hinge. I tilted left, caught his wrist with my left hand. Rotated counter-clockwise. Basic Marine joint control. No bones broken, just balance stolen. Colton dropped to one knee, yelling, You dare!" Contact 2. Where legality snaps. He rushed again, this time swinging his right fist. Harder, wilder, pure rage. I stepped back half a pace, my right hand locking onto his upper arm, while my left pushed upward, under his elbow, shoulder, redirect. His shoulder joint slipped just slightly. Not broken, not permanently damaged, but enough to drop his strength out of him. He screamed. Neighbors turned on their lights. Janet yelled, "Hit him! Colton, hit him! Kill him!" Harper froze in the middle of the room. I saw her hands trembling, but instead of covering her face and crying like every time before, she pulled out her phone. She recorded. It was the first moment Harper fought back with evidence, not tears. Contact 3. Full self-defense. Colton tried to kick me in the stomach. I pivoted, used his own momentum, hooking my left forearm under his knee. A heavy thud echoed as he fell backward onto the floor. I didn't hit him, didn't kick him, didn't retaliate. I just stood there, hands raised at chest level. Pure textbook defensive posture. He attacked me, I said clearly. I defended myself. Right then, shouts from the doorway. Hey, stop! Stop! Right now! 2 officers pushed in, flashlights in my face. Body cams are glowing red. Officer Nunez barked, Nobody move! Everyone, stay still! Harper raised her hands. It wasn't my dad. Colton attacked first. I have video. I spoke immediately, every word sharp. Self-defense. I caused no permanent harm. I only protected myself. Officer Miller angled the camera toward me, his voice lowering when he saw my stance. The stance of someone who'd been attacked. But not the threat here. And Colton? He was rolling on the floor, clutching his shoulders, spitting curses. Crazy old man, he attacked me, he tried to kill me. Janet shrieked, Officers! Arrest that old man! Arrest him now! Harper played the video. She held the phone up to the body cam. Blue light reflected across the officers' faces. They exchanged a look. Officer Nunez said quietly, This video aligns with lawful self-defense. Mr. Mercer acted to protect himself. Janet's face drained of color. Colton stopped screaming, his face going pale, not from pain, but from fear. And then the moment I knew would come finally did. Lily, standing in the bedroom doorway with wide, terrified eyes, burst into a scream. I'm scared of Daddy. I'm scared. Don't let Daddy hit Mommy again. The whole room fell silent. One sentence from a child, enough to flip the entire legal outcome. Officer Nunez turned to his partner. Call CPS, right now. The phone was out instantly. Janet trembled. No, you can't call them. She's my granddaughter. But it was far too late. Harper held Lily tightly. I stood behind them. Colton lifted his head, face ghost white. Then he whispered as if he couldn't believe it. No, don't call CPS. Please. But the call had already been made. The red body cam light was still recording everything. When the CPS vehicle arrived, Lily pointed at me and said, I want to stay with Grandpa. And Colton? He stood there, head lowered, finally realizing that this time his power was truly gone. CPS arrived only 30 minutes after the police call. A white Pierce County SUV pulled up in front of 317 Redwood Street with 2 people inside. Family supervisor Karen Lowell and intern Matthew Orr. They weren't loud, they weren't rushed, but their silence made the entire neighborhood stop and stare. Neighbors opened doors, peeked through blinds, and several I could clearly see were already recording. Karen stood on the porch, opened her notebook, and said calmly, We're with Child Protective Services, Pierce County. We'll be conducting an initial safety assessment immediately. Janet burst out onto the porch like a crow with its tail stepped on. No, I don't allow this. This is my son's house. Nobody has the right. Officer Nunez stepped between her and the CPS workers, his voice sharp as steel. Ma'am, step back. Janet kept screaming. I'm the child's grandmother. I have rights. That little girl is the one causing all the trouble. Karen tilted her head at her, wrote something down, then delivered a sentence that froze the entire porch. Ma'am, you're escalating the situation. The words echoed because the body cam caught every syllable, and worse, Penny across the street was live streaming it to the Gig Harbor Community Watch Group. Janet opened her mouth to spit another protest, but Officer Miller pointed at the ground. Ma'am, step off the porch, now. Janet turned purple and reluctantly stepped into the yard. Marcy stood beside her, trembling like a soaked cat. Karen entered the house, taking in the stench of beer, the torn furniture, the fist holes in the walls, the empty cans, the alcohol fumes still clinging to Colton. Matthew documented every corner. Environmental hazard, unstable adult male presence, minor exhibiting fear response. Lily clung to Harper, face buried in her mother's shoulder, her small body shaking. I stood near them, one arm slightly behind like a shield. Karen asked Lily, Are you afraid of anyone in this house? Lily nodded instantly without a second's thought. I'm scared of Daddy Colton. Karen turned to Harper. Have you experienced physical abuse? Harper didn't cry this time. She simply nodded, slowly, heavily, as if dragging 6 years of memories into that single motion. Karen reviewed the police records Officer Nunes provided. 2 domestic dispute reports, old Bruised photos, doctor notes, and most importantly, the video Harper recorded tonight. Karen exhaled, wrote down, immediate safety action required. Then she looked at me. And you, Mr. Mercer? I stood straight. I don't live here. I came to visit my daughter and granddaughter. I witnessed Colton initiate the assault. Karen nodded and wrote, non-resident family member, stable, protective, no threat. Then she delivered her decision so quickly that Janet screamed as if struck. Under the authority of CPS Pierce County, to ensure the safety of the minor, I am ordering Janet Drake and Marcy Drake to vacate the residence temporarily for a minimum of 72 hours. Colton Drake is required to leave the home immediately. Officer Nunes recommended detox, but he refused and signed a self-liability waiver. Janet shrieked, What? This is our house. We pay for everything. Harper cut her off, her voice turning firm. I've paid the rent for 6 years, alone. Matthew nodded. Confirmed through the bank records Ms. Harper provided. Janet stood there like she'd been struck by lightning. The humiliation didn't come from me. It came from her own truth being exposed in front of the neighbors. Karen turned to me. Mr. Mercer, for the next 72 hours, you may temporarily supervise Harper and Lily. She is the primary caregiver. You're assisting only. I nodded. I understand. It was the first time I saw Harper release a breath like she'd finally set down a boulder she'd been carrying for years. But Janet wasn't done. When Officer Miller told her to gather her things and leave, she snarled, You think you've won? I'll take back control of this house. I'll bring Colton home. I'll take Lily back. And you, Mr. Mercer, you'll be out of here. Marcy slipped in beside her, voice small but venomous. No one beats the Drake family. No one. They left, but I saw Janet's eyes before she stepped into the patrol car. Small, sharp, cold, and full of hatred. The eyes of someone who does not accept defeat. Harper whispered, Dad, I feel like they're going to do something. I didn't answer, because I thought so too. When the patrol cars pulled away and Redwood Street fell quiet again, Lily wrapped her arms around my leg and whispered, Grandpa, they're not coming back, right? I crouched, resting a hand on her hair. You're safe. I'm here. But inside, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. People like Janet and Marcy, once stripped of power, never stop. Janet had left the house since the afternoon, but her silence was never something that comforted me. People like her, when stripped of power, always find the filthiest ways to take it back. And proof came that very night. Around 7, someone knocked 3 sharp times on the door. Harper opened it and found a brown paper bag on the porch, a rush note taped on top. Tea for recovery. The old man needs rest. I only needed one look at the handwriting to know whose it was. Janet's. Harper whispered, Dad, they're planning something again, aren't they? I didn't answer. I opened the bag. Inside was a warm glass teapot. I twisted the lid, brought it to my nose, and immediately caught the scent of high-dose zolpidem buried under herbs, a strong sedative capable of knocking out an adult in minutes. My Marine training needed only seconds to recognize it. Harper went pale. They want you unconscious so they can claim you hurt yourself. I set the teapot on the table, poured a little into a cup just to observe the thickness and smell. I didn't bring it to my lips. The rising steam alone confirmed it wasn't tea. I pinched the cup, tipped it, and spilled it across the floor like a small accident. Whoops. Slippery hands, I said evenly, though my spine had gone ice cold. Not a drop entered anyone's mouth, and most importantly, no one in the house had a chance to drink it by mistake. Harper covered her mouth. If Lily had drunk that... I nodded. Keep the teapot. It's evidence. No one touches it. Harper sealed it in a zipper bag and placed it in the top shelf of the fridge, where CPS would inspect it in the morning. That night, per CPS's recommendation, Troy temporarily stayed with Harper and Lily, because to them, our house was safer than letting him drift around while his mother was ordered out. When I walked back into the living room, I saw Lily curled in a corner, and Troy, Marcy Drake's son, pulling her stuffed bunny. "Mine!" Lily yanked back, eyes red. Troy pushed her onto the carpet, making her cry. I picked Lily up, placed her in my lap, then turned to Troy. I didn't yell. Children aren't guilty for growing up around toxic adults. I knelt to his eye level. "Troy, do you know what a knight is?" Troy blinked. "Someone strong." "Yes," I said, "but strong to protect, not to bully." I placed the bunny back in Lily's hands. "In this house, Lily is Queen Lily, and you are Knight Troy, the knight who protects the queen." Troy froze for a moment, then nodded softly. "I'm sorry." He gently placed the bunny in Lily's lap. "Sorry, Queen Lily." Harper stood behind me, a hand over her mouth in surprise. The two children reconciled like no tears had ever happened. But adults were different, and tonight, what was coming wasn't child's play. After dinner, Harper and Lily went to bed. The house fell into darkness. Only me on the sofa, eyes never leaving the front door. I knew Janet's scheme was only the opening act. The wind off Puget Sound seeped through the doorframe, cold as ice water. And then, 1:13 a.m., the rumble of a motorcycle climbed the hill. The exhaust roared, heavy shaking Redwood Street. Colton Drake. He didn't bother hiding how drunk he was, riding through the night. Harper jolted awake. Lily screamed. I stood slowly, blood cooling into metal. Colton screeched to a stop in front of 3i, killed the engine, staggered out, and roared into the darkness. "Old man, get out here! I'm not done with you!" The motorcycle engine cut off right in front of the porch, a little past 1 in the morning, jolting the whole house awake. I stood still in the middle of the living room, listening to Colton's staggering footsteps climbing the steps, the reek of alcohol seeping through the door like poisonous smoke. He pounded on it and shouted incoherently, "Old man, I'm finishing you tonight." Harper grabbed Lily and locked the bedroom door just like I'd told her. No matter what happened, she and her daughter had to be safe first. I stepped toward the front door but kept a safe distance. When I cracked it open just a sliver, Colton, drunk and feral, lunged in like a provoked animal, his right hand gripping a shard of glass he'd just smashed off a street lamp. His movement was fast but predictable to someone trained by the Marines. As he slashed the shard toward my neck, I pivoted left, caught his wrist with both hands, and twisted counterclockwise. A basic joint control move meant only to disarm, not injure. Colton, off balance and drunk, crashed face first onto the floor, groaning before slipping into a brief faint. I didn't hit him, didn't kick him, didn't strike back. This was pure, lawful self-defense. I stepped into the dark corner of the living room, turned my phone camera on, and waited. 5 seconds. 6 seconds. On the 6th, I used a rough, low voice, just loud enough to carry out to the yard. "Stop! Elliot, let go of me. Stop." One sentence. No names, no orders, nothing incriminating, but enough for anyone lurking outside to hear. And I knew Janet and Marcy hadn't left. They always believed Colton was the victim who needed rescuing. The moment they heard me yell, Janet shrieked like someone had grabbed her throat. "Colton, he's hurting you!" The door flew open under the force of panic. Janet charged in first, Marcy right behind her. Because the room was pitch black and Colton was lying face down, they couldn't see who was who. They only recognized a body on the floor and assumed I was attacking him. Janet grabbed a metal picture frame off the table. Marcy snatched Troy's toy baseball bat from under the couch. Then both of them rushed the figure on the carpet. Janet screamed, "Don't you hit my son!" and slammed the frame onto Colton's back. Marcy, thinking she was saving her brother, swung the bat down on his shoulder. Let him go! But Colton was alone on the floor. No one was hitting him except his own family. Each blow landed. I stayed perfectly still in the dark, recording, not intervening. This wasn't a trap I set. This was the consequence of their own blindness. Colton woke in the chaos, screaming, "Stop! Mom! Stop!" But Janet thought he was calling for help from me and struck harder. "I'm here! I'll beat him for you!" On Marcy's third hit, Colton's body jolted, his breath coming in broken bursts. I waited until the exact moment Janet's rage ran out, and she hesitated. Then I stepped out of the shadows and turned on the lights. The brightness filled the room like a slap across their faces. Janet froze. Marcy dropped the bat. Under the harsh glare, Colton lay curled up, trembling, covered in fresh bruises, every one of them inflicted by his own mother and sister. Janet stuttered, No, that can't be." Marcy turned pale. "Mom, we hit the wrong person." Colton looked at me in a half-conscious panic, eyes wide like a terrified child. "Mom, you hit me." I raised my phone, the recording light blazing. "I didn't touch him. You did this yourselves." Janet burst into tears, her voice cracking. "Please, don't show that video to the police." But the sirens were already screaming down the street, sharp and cold like a blade splitting the night. Red and blue lights washed across the windows, sweeping through the living room. 2 patrol cars pulled into Redwood Street, and then an ambulance, slower but heavier. Officers stepped out, paramedics rushed up the steps, and Colton, who once believed he was untouchable, looked at me as if I were the one who shattered his illusion of power, even though I hadn't laid a single finger on him during the entire chaos. When the police stepped into 317 Redwood Street, the red-blue lights from the 2 patrol cars stretched across the walls, like someone sweeping cold fire through the air. I stood still at the far end of the living room, holding my phone up, still recording, not to defend myself, but to prove I had never touched Colton Drake. Officer Ramirez, broad-shouldered with a steel-low voice, signaled, "Sir, put the phone down." I obeyed, placing it on the table, but keeping the screen facing them. Ramirez knelt beside Colton. At the same time, Officer Green switched on his body cam, the tiny red light blinking under his chin. Janet stood trembling near the door, her face bleaching out as the camera swung toward her. Marcy hiccuped through her breaths, her hands still dusty from the toy bat. Ramirez asked, "Did you attack anyone?" I said, "No. The entire thing is recorded on my phone." Green glanced at Janet. "Ma'am, who are you claiming attacked whom?" Janet stuttered, her eyes darting like someone lost in her own collapsing lie. He hit my son. We rushed in to save—" Ramirez looked down at Colton, then at the purple-red bruises across his back and shoulder, the rectangular imprint of a metal picture frame and the curved impact mark of a toy bat. None of those matched any self-defense technique. Ramirez adjusted his body cam, his voice flat and cold. "Ma'am, based on the wound patterns, the person who hit Colton was positioned behind him, and to his right. He pointed at me, was standing in that corner." Janet stepped back. No, Green cut her off. "Ma'am, Mr. Mercer's video and our body cam footage match. You and Ms. Marcy struck Colton Drake." The words detonated like an explosion. Janet collapsed where she stood, hands on her head. Marcy sobbed without sound. Outside, neighbors had already gathered. Penny, the old man from 319, the Mexican couple from 321, all holding up their phones, live streaming into the same Gig Harbor community, watch group Janet once used to mock Harper. Green ordered, "Ma'am, turn around, hands behind your back." Janet cried, "No, don't let the neighbors see me like this." But the body cam kept rolling. This was public record material. One day anyone could pull it through FOIA. The woman who had stood on this porch calling me a crazy old man who doesn't belong in this neighborhood was now being handcuffed on the very patch of concrete she used to strut across. When Ramirez led Marcy out next, The glow of 3 phones followed them like the judgment lights of an invisible court. Gig Harbor hated drama, but it was merciless about domestic violence. And tonight, Janet, Drake became its newest symbol of disgrace. As for me, I simply stood by the window, one hand resting on the frame, saying nothing. Harper held Lily behind me, the little girl burying her face in her mother's chest at the red-blue glare. I leaned down and whispered, "It's all right, Queen Lily. Grandpa's here." Ramirez turned back. "Sir, I need to review your video." I handed him the phone. He skimmed 3 minutes, enough to see Colton storming in, me disarming him legally, then him dropping from drunken imbalance. Then Janet and Marcy rushing in and beating the wrong man. Green said, "I'll attach this to the report. It corroborates our body cam." Ramirez told Harper, "Ma'am, we'll file a CPS referral tonight." Harper nodded, eyes red from too many nights surrounded by violence. As the officers escorted Janet and Marcy into the cruiser, the neighbors' whispers rose like a cold kind of music. "My God, they beat their own son." Janet called Harper crazy, and now she's the one in cuffs. Posted in the group, quick. Janet looked back at me from the patrol car's rear seat, her expression a blend of rage and helpless collapse. She didn't understand that I hadn't touched her family. She had destroyed it herself. When the police cars pulled away from Redwood Street, Ramirez's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at Harper. "Pierce County prosecutor wants an early probable cause hearing, maybe within 48 hours. Harper gasped. "Meaning, they're really going to prosecute?" Ramirez nodded. "Based on the video and the body cam, this is felony domestic assault, and whoever caused it is the one who answers for it." I looked toward the end of Redwood Street, where the police lights had vanished, and understood this was only the beginning. The prosecutor was involved now, which meant this wasn't a family dispute anymore. It had become a criminal case in Pierce County Court. The next morning, when the weak Washington sunlight slipped into the living room of 3-17 Redwood Street, I knew the real storm was only beginning. 3 firm knocks struck the door. Government knocks, not neighbors. I opened it. Pierce County prosecutor Dinah Patel stood on the porch with 2 investigators. She flashed her badge. "You're Elias Mercer?" I nodded. Her voice was short, cold as steel. "We're here to collect all records related to 6 years of abuse at this address. As of last night, the case has been elevated to a felony." Harper stood behind me, clutching Lily so tightly her hands trembled. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. Let Grandpa handle this." Dina opened a folder containing a 3-part summary. 1. Janet Drake and Marcy Drake. Aggravated assault. Felony. B. 2. Colton. Drake. Enhancement for prior incidents. Domestic violence pattern. 3. CPS referral. Endangerment of a minor. Lily Harper. Harper covered her mouth. They're actually being charged." Dina looked her straight in the eyes. "The police body cams and Mr. Mercer's video are indisputable, and Colton has had 3 prior calls in 6 years, all marked insufficient evidence. Last night changed everything." I walked to the wooden cabinet beside the fireplace and opened the hidden compartment only Elliot and I knew. Inside was the evidence pack, documents I had been prepping for months before Rainier. Harper's therapy bills, 3 CT scans of Elliot's arm and ribs, 4 CPS reports marked unable to verify, 6 years of injury photos Harper had hidden in an old phone, and 2 body cam clips from previous police visits where nothing was done. I laid everything out on the table. Dina's brows tightened. All of this is from the last 6 years." Harper nodded, eyes watery. "Yes, I thought." No one cared. Dina flipped through page after page, her face hardening. "We care, and the court will care." Investigator Kim opened his laptop and started transferring files. When he reached the clip of Colton stumbling in drunk at 1:13 a.m. and Janet and Marcy beating their own son, he muttered, "The prosecutor is going to love this." Harper shivered when Lily's frightened cries played from the body cam. I knelt beside the little girl and said softly, "No one will ever hurt you again. Grandpa promises." Dina watched the scene, then said, "We'll be requesting an expanded protective order for both mother and child." Once every file was uploaded into the system, Dina closed her folder and delivered the sentence that would shift everything. "This afternoon, I'll present all of this at the probable cause hearing. But there's one more thing you need to know." Harper looked up. "What is it?" Dina exhaled slowly. "Colton's attorney just sent an early request. They want a private meeting with you and Mr. Mercer to discuss a silent settlement." Harper froze. "You mean they want to pay us to keep quiet?" Dina nodded. "Exactly. They know last night's video is a public relations disaster. They're trying to contain it before the body cam footage becomes public through FOI. I looked out the window. Redwood Street still cold and wet, but brighter than yesterday. Last night they thought I was the weakest man in the room. Today they wanted to buy our silence. I turned back to Dina Patel and said, "Tell them I'll attend the meeting." Harper jerked. "Dad?" I answered slowly, firmly. "I'll listen to what they have to say, but not to settle. Only to see just how desperate they've become." That afternoon, the sky over Gig Harbor hung heavy with clouds, like a thin layer of dust on an old table, gray, cold, and waiting for the worst. Pierce County Police had called a public safety meeting at the Gig Harbor Community Hall, the place the community always flooded into whenever a scandal hit, as if witnessing an unofficial trial. Harper, Lily, and I sat in the 7th row. Up front, more than 120 residents murmured, heads shaking, whispers about the assault video from last week, talk about the sudden emergency meeting called by the police. To my left, Harper clutched Lily's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. I placed my hand over theirs and whispered, "It's all right. Today the truth speaks for itself." When Lieutenant Morris stepped up to open the meeting, the community hall doors suddenly burst open. Janet Drake stormed in first, panting like a storm falling off a roof, followed by Marcy with fire in her eyes and her lips pressed into a hard line. They weren't there out of curiosity. They were there to fight. The entire room erupted. Some people backed away, others raised their phones to record. Janet shouted at full volume as if she were standing in her own living room, "I want CPS to give me back my granddaughter. Harper kidnapped Lily. She's a terrible mother. And that Elias man is insane. He shouldn't be anywhere near children." Marcy jumped in. "Yes, we want the community to know the truth. Elias Stone lied to everyone. He's the problem, not Colton." More than 100 sets of eyes turned to me. 1 beat, 2 beats. Silence stretched tight like a drumskin. I stood up. Not fast, not yelling, not explaining. I simply walked toward the tech table where the hall kept the projector and microphones. Lieutenant Morris handed me the mic without asking a single question. He knew exactly what was coming. I plugged a USB into the machine. The large projector screen behind the podium lit up. Janet began to pale. "What are you doing? You can't—" I spoke clearly, not raising my voice, but every word carried to the back of the hall. "I'm going to show everyone here the truth the Drake family has been hiding for 6 years." I pressed play. The video began. Footage from that night filled the screen. Colton stumbling drunk into the room at 1:13 a.m., him cursing, objects crashing, then him screaming beneath my staged voice. Then came the moment Janet and Marcy burst into the dark room, convinced they were saving Colton from me. But they were beating their own son, swinging the rolling pin, slamming the mop handle down on his already injured arm. Colton gagged and crying into the cloth. Then the light snapped on. Janet and Marcy froze when they saw the man tied up wasn't me, but Colton, face bloody, wrist broken, breathing ragged. The video ended with my voice. "Welcome to the truth." The hall fell dead silent. Every second stretched like an hour. A woman in the front row raised a hand to her mouth, stunned. A man shook his head in disgust. Someone whispered to their friend, "My God." They beat their own son. Then Janet made a sound, not a scream, but a broken groan of someone realizing their entire life had fallen off a cliff. No, no, no. It wasn't my fault. I thought... She staggered a step, then collapsed to her knees in the aisle, clawing at the carpet as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. Marcy didn't collapse. She turned and tried to run out of the hall, like a panicked animal. But she only made it 3 steps before a resident blocking the front door, Mr. Daniels, the woodworking shop owner, lifted his phone and said, "No, you watched it. Now you stay to hear the rest." Marcy cursed, but every phone in the room was pointed at her. No escape, no excuses. I stood there, mic still in hand, watching Janet struggle for breath on the floor. 6 years of Harper's pain. 6 years of Elliot's bruises. 6 years of Lily's fear. All of it converged into this moment, because this was the moment. The back doors of the community hall swung open. A figure stepped inside. Harper gasped for air. Janet lifted her head off the carpet, eyes widening with something worse than fear. The man who walked in did so calmly, as if attending a perfectly ordinary town meeting, but everyone turned to stare, because he had my face. Elliot Mercer, my twin brother, appeared. The hall went silent as death, and in that instant, everyone understood. Every lie the Drake family told about 6 years of abuse collapsed at once. Because the appearance of Elliot Mercer, my identical twin, with fresh injuries still visible on his face and body, was the living proof, the undeniable evidence that Colton Drake had beaten his wife and had beaten my brother. There was no room left for denial. Janet went pale, and I looked straight at my brother, ready for the biggest reveal of all. Right after Elliot stepped into the community hall, and the whole place fell into a stone-heavy silence, police ordered a temporary recess to handle legal procedures. But both attorneys, Rowell for us and Treadwell for the Drakes, agreed to move the settlement meeting into the small back conference room behind the hall, while the community's outrage was still burning hot. The room was barely 20 square meters, but the air inside felt thick as a courtroom. A long table, old wooden chairs, yellow overhead lights shining directly onto Janet and Marcy's stunned faces. Colton sat between them, wrist in a hard splint, face swollen purple, lips split, eyes full of fear and hatred, but stripped of every ounce of power he once held. Elliot sat beside me, pale but steady. Harper held Lily, and for the first time in years, my daughter's back was straight instead of bent under fear. I heard a sharp gasp ripple across the room, a collective shock spreading through every single person. Janet stared at us, eyes twitching like she'd seen a ghost. Marcy covered her mouth and shrank back into her chair. And Colton, bruised and battered, stared at Elliot, then at me, as if realizing he had picked a fight with the wrong man this entire time. You two look exactly the same?" Janet stuttered. No, that's impossible." Janet broke into heaving sobs, and Colton looked back and forth between us, like he'd finally understood the scale of his mistake. Attorney Rowell opened her case file and placed a 30-plus page packet in front of Treadwell. "Civil settlement, $320,000. Terms are non-negotiable." Janet nearly screamed. $320,000? Are you insane? We don't have that kind of money." Rowell remained calm, as if reading the weather. "We have the invoices. The amount is fully justified." She pushed a breakdown across the table. 1. $1,850, x 72 months. $133,200 in rent Harper paid alone. 2. $47,000 in medical and therapy bills over 6 years. 3. $9,000 in CPS mandated therapy for Lily. 4. $131,000 in emotional distress and property damage over 6 years. Rowell concluded, total $320,200 We rounded down to $320 for expediency? Colton gritted his teeth. We're not paying. Rowell opened her laptop and rotated the screen toward him. The video from that night played, the moment Janet and Marcy beat their own son, the thuds of the rolling pin, the thwack of the toy bat, Marcy yelling, "Hit him harder!" and then me turning on the lights, exposing the truth. Janet covered her face. Marcy shook violently. Rowell said, "If you refuse, this video goes straight to the criminal case, and under FOIA, every resident in Gig Harbor can request a copy." Treadwell swallowed hard. "We need a deal to reduce charges." Rowell nodded. "Good. Then here are the conditions." She slid 3 packets forward. First, Colton signs a no-conditions divorce and cedes full custody of Lily to Harper. Second, Janet and Marcy sign a 5-year no-contact order barring them from Harper, Lily, and Elliot. Third, the Drake family agrees to pay $320,000 within 90 days through our escrow office. Janet sobbed. "But we don't have—" Rawl replied coolly. "Then sell the house, or borrow, or let the court decide. But I promise you this, once that video hits trial, no jury will forgive any of you." Colton slammed the table, wincing in pain. "Fine, I'll sign. Just reduce my charges." Rowell's tone stayed icy. "No one promised reduced charges. This is civil. Criminal charges are up to the prosecutor." Treadwell pulled Colton aside and whispered, "If you don't sign, you're looking at felony B+ enhancement, up to 10 years. The room held its breath for a full minute. Then Colton signed, a shaky signature from a man who had finally lost everything. Janet and Marcy signed next. Notary stamp, $320,000, no contact order, divorce, custody. Harper sat still, staring at Colton's signature like watching the last shadow of her past being erased. Treadwell rose, pale. "We will secure the money, on the condition that this agreement stays confidential." Rowell replied, "As long as they comply, we have no reason to release anything." The air loosened slightly, but no one leaving that room would ever be the same again. Harper rose. Her eyes were red, but her shoulders were stronger than I had ever seen. She looked straight at Colton. Her voice was calm enough to freeze the room. "From this day on, I walk away from the Drake family forever. I'm not coming back, not ever." Janet collapsed into her chair, and Colton watched Harper walk out, as if realizing too late that his power died the moment he signed his name. After the settlement signing and the temporary divorce ruling, the Drake household felt hollowed out, while we stepped out into Gig Harbor like people who had finally escaped a windowless room after 6 straight years. I took Harper and Lily back to my old waterfront house, the one I built in my 40s, perched on a slope overlooking the inlet, cedar walls bleached by salt wind, the moss-covered roof leaning but still standing, stubborn the way my life has always been. When Harper walked in for the first time, she stopped in the middle of the living room, where the afternoon light poured through the big window and washed the old floorboards in warm gold. She set Lily down, and the kid, for the first time in years, didn't shrink back, didn't run to a corner, didn't flinch at adult voices. She ran straight to the window, pressed her face to the glass, and squealed in a real child's voice, "Mommy, there are boats, and birds too." I leaned against the doorway, my carpenter's hands folded across my chest, and something warm moved in my ribs, something I thought I'd lost somewhere in those 10 years behind a locked ward. Hope. For the next 2 weeks, I repaired the house with the same hands that helped hold my whole life up, replacing salt-rotted windows, shaving down the porch railing, repainting Lily's room in the lavender blue she loved. Harper cleaned and unpacked, laughing small, hesitant laughs that grew a little louder every day. On the 3rd day, while Lily napped, Harper stood in the kitchen with her hand on the mimosa wood counter I built myself and whispered, "Uncle, I'm grateful. I thought my life was going to be darkness forever. I answered softly, "No, sweetheart. Darkness doesn't win when someone stands between it and you." Elliot, my brother, was placed in extended therapy at Tacoma Recovery Center. In just 2 weeks, the gray-blue color on his face faded. His shoulders no longer twitched every time a door closed too hard. The doctors said he was responding well to a low-pressure environment and family support. One evening he stood on the porch watching me fix the steps and said, "Elias, this is the first time in years I can breathe like a normal person." I only smiled, but inside that meant more to me than any settlement ever could. As for Troy, the kid who once bullied Lily, a child raised under Marcy's screaming and chaos, CPS placed him in a special children's support program. He was moved to live with a distant aunt in Port Orchard. When CPS sent the evaluation, it read, "Aggressive behavior linked to toxic household environment." I looked at the report, then at Lily playing with her puzzle pieces by the window. She smiled, eyes bright. I exhaled. No child deserves to grow up afraid. And when Harper asked, "Do you think I should let Troy see Lily sometimes?" I answered without hesitation, "When she's strong enough and when he's safe enough." On the 5th evening, I prepared a dinner I'd wanted for years, a dinner of people who were no longer afraid. I made cedar plank salmon, the dish Elliot and I used to eat with our mother. Elliot set the salad on the table. Harper laid the napkins out, and Lily ran around the chairs, giggling. When the 4 of us finally sat, 2 twin brothers, a niece who had endured too much, and a little girl who finally understood what safety felt like, I felt my throat tighten. Elliot lifted his glass of water and murmured, "To a new home, and to people who can finally breathe." Harper smiled. Lily clinked her juice against Elliot's glass and shouted, "Cheers!" I've lived 60 years, but that moment, that was the first time I felt like I belonged to a real family. A week later, while I was replacing the rotten planks on the porch, mail from Tacoma PD arrived. Inside was just one sheet of paper with a handwritten line. "Your footage saved a child. Lieutenant Morris." I sat down on the steps, the letter trembling in my hand. Not because of the wind, because I realized that 10 years in the facility, all the sleepless nights, everything I had done, had finally pulled a child out of hell. Harper came to the porch, leaning against me. "What is it?" I handed her the letter. Her eyes reddened as she read. Lily toddled out, wrapped her arms around my leg, smiling for no reason, like she somehow knew the world had finally become safe. We lived the calmest days we'd had since all of this began. Mornings smelling of waffles, afternoons with Lily running through the grass, nights listening to waves below the hill. But peace never lasts forever. Because by the weekend, Harper's phone rang. She looked at the screen, her lips tightening. Then she turned to me and said quietly, "Uncle, Janet wants to meet us at the courthouse. One last meeting." I squeezed Harper's hand, not out of fear, but because I knew the Drakes weren't finished yet. The morning in Pierce County carried a thin layer of mist, so light it felt like you could step through it and watch it disappear. Harper sat beside me on the wooden bench, waiting for the final confirmation hearing of the no-contact order. Elliot sat behind us in his gray jacket, the bruising on his face fading but still carrying the imprint of the months he'd been beaten. Lily sat in Harper's lap, clutching the stuffed rabbit I'd sewn back together the night before. The air didn't feel like the start of a fight. It felt like the last quiet moment before a door finally closes. When the clerk called, the matter of Harper Drake versus Janet Drake, Marcy Drake, and Colton Drake, the entire courtroom fell silent. Janet and Marcy were already seated across the aisle. No arrogance left, no screaming, no trace of the women who once stood on the porch at 317 Redwood Street, yelling that this crazy old man didn't belong in their neighborhood. They looked like 2 people collapsed into themselves, shaking. Colton wasn't present. He'd been transferred to a detox facility and was awaiting his own criminal hearing. Only the two women who once believed they were untouchable remained. When Judge Ridley entered, Janet jumped up and then dropped to her knees, right in the middle of the courtroom. I'm sorry. Please, Your Honor, please reduce the penalty. I didn't know it would go this far. Her voice cracked like glass hitting the tile floor, but the judge only looked at the file, her tone so calm it made Janet panic. You do not need to ask me for forgiveness. This court rules on behavior, not on tears. Janet froze. Marcy stared at her hands, fingers twisted together, unable to look at Harper even for a second. Prosecutor Patel rose. Your Honor, the defendants have already signed the civil settlement of $320,000, agreed to the divorce, agreed to the no-contact order, and do not contest full custody for Harper. The judge nodded. Then there is no dispute left to resolve. Today we only put a legal and moral period at the end of this case. She turned to Harper. Do you wish to say anything? Harper rose. I saw her hands shaking, but her voice wasn't. I just want my daughter to grow up safe, that's all. The judge nodded, then turned to me. Mr. Mercer, Elias Mercer, would you like to speak before I issue my ruling? The entire room looked at me, and for the first time in years I felt no need to tense my shoulders, no need to hide who I really was, no need to pretend to be the weaker brother anymore. I stepped forward, my voice low and steady. Your Honor, I don't want revenge against anyone in this room. I stood up because I couldn't watch a child be terrified every single night. Janet sobbed. I looked at her, not with anger, not with hatred, just with the truth. All my life, people taught me that I was dangerous, that I was a weapon, that I needed to be locked away so the world could be safe. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling the slow, heavy thud of my heart. But if I hadn't been standing in that living room on Redwood Street that night, Lily would still be in that house. If I hadn't held back my fists, hadn't controlled the anger, hadn't used the exact things they were afraid of, that child wouldn't have been saved. I paused, then said what 60 years of living had finally taught me. Your Honor, I've realized I'm not a weapon. I'm a shield. Harper covered her mouth. Janet cried again, not the raging, violent kind of crying she used to do, but the crying of someone hit by the truth harder than any blow. Judge Ridley leaned back, studying me for a long moment, then said, A man who understands he is a shield will never be a danger. She delivered the ruling. 5-year no-contact order for Janet and Marcy Drake. Extended protective order for Harper and Lily. Civil settlement affirmed. Full custody to Harper. This matter is concluded. Janet collapsed. Marcy covered her face, but none of us looked at them with triumph. When the judge stepped down, Lily dropped her stuffed rabbit, ran to me, wrapped her arms around my leg, and looked up with a clear, tiny voice. Uncle Elias, can we go back to the Ocean House now? I picked her up. Behind me, Harper cried. Not the cry of pain, but the cry of someone who had finally stepped out of a long, dark night. Elliot laid a hand on my shoulder and whispered, You did the right thing, Elias. I looked at the three of them, Elliot, Harper, Lily, and felt the world settle in a way no courtroom could ever provide. No shouting, no accusations, just a silence as gentle as a Gig Harbor morning. And as we stepped out of the courthouse, the wind from Puget Sound swept across the steps, reminding me of the truth I'd only recently learned. Justice isn't loud. It's the sound of a child finally sleeping without fear. If you've stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Not for listening to a revenge story, but for following the journey of a family clawing its way out of the dark. I spent 10 years behind white walls, learning to hold my fists still, only to understand one simple thing. Sometimes, the thing that saves a child isn't a shout. It's the presence of someone willing to stand in the storm. If this story made you pause even for a heartbeat, just one, because you saw yourself or someone you love in Harper or Lily or Elliot. Leave a single so I know you're still here with me. And tell me what city you're listening from. If you believe justice doesn't need noise, and that some people are born not to wage war, but to shield the ones who can't shield themselves, follow the channel and turn on notifications. New stories every week, stories about silence becoming strength, and about people reclaiming their dignity in places where light once seemed impossible.